If we get to the place where the government is coming after the, 350 or 400 million guns or whatever it is that Americans have, it's game over. It's done. It's game over. So to even say that is kind of stupid. We don't want a revolution, my friends. And it's very dangerous for leaders on any side to be sparking that in any way. I'll tell you why Trump is here. It's actually quite makes sense. No regulation. Yeah, no regulation is awesome. And it helped to bring other nations out of poverty. So we saw global poverty decrease tremendously, but we also saw the global economy is not what it was in 1985. It's completely different. And there are a lot of Americans who are realizing this, and they're feeling this, and they're seeing it. And no one has stopped it. I wave a flag, I put myself in the line for my country, so I'll join the militia group. And then you lose track of what you're actually fighting for, because you're not paying attention, because you're so busy with other things.
What is your thought on the rise of violent political rhetoric within the United States?
We have ratcheted up the rhetoric in many different spheres of life. Okay, we saw it on the left. It really got ratcheted up under the death of George Floyd. The protests against the police. I mean, there are a number of things, right? It has been ratcheted, ramped up on the right with a lot of groups that are these kind of patriot groups, right? Militia groups and so on that are quite numerous, actually, in the United States. We do have a lot of guns here. So the thing is, we are sitting on a powder keg of sorts because we have so many guns. And the people who own the guns are clearly, most people aren't going to use them, and most people aren't intending to, and most people just talk a big game when they say things like that. Like, you'll come get my gun over my dead body or something like that. First off, if you just stop for a second, if you think about what that means, people say the government's going to come get your guns. If we get to the place where the government is coming after the, 350 or 400 million guns or whatever it is that Americans have, it's game over. It's done. It's game over. So to even say that is kind of stupid, really, because if you understand what I mean. If the government starts taking people's guns, it's a war. It's a civil war. It's just insane. So you never have to say, the gun owners in here, and I'm not a gun owner, but I am a Second Amendment supporter. I grew up with guns. I shot a gun for the first time when I was 3 years old, right? So it's like I'm a gun person, but I just don't own a gun. So it's fine. It's not going to happen. And if it happens, you don't want to be here anyway. Just get up to Canada, go to Mexico, go somewhere, because we're in the middle of a civil war. Okay? So there's a lot of rhetoric on that. It is, in my humble opinion, knowing, as someone who has studied revolutions and social movements, and when I was a PhD student, I had two areas of focus. One was Latin America and Africa, socio-political development, and the other was revolutions and social conflict and social movements. So I happen to have a lot of background on revolutions. We don't want a revolution, my friends, and it's very dangerous for leaders on any side to be sparking that in any way. And so when the militia groups grow because some candidate gets voted into power and they're afraid of the candidate, it's incumbent upon political leaders to try to tone that stuff down. It's really dangerous to have so many guns. So I'm concerned. Yeah. I don't like that kind of rhetoric, which is why you don't hear it from me. You don't hear that kind of stuff from me, because it's very dangerous.
I wanted to ask you why you think it is that the country is so completely and utterly divided in their vote, and as an extension of that, do you believe it's catered in any way, shape, or form?
It's catered?
Yeah, like almost intentional that we're supposed to be divided.
Yesterday I was talking to Julie on the phone, and she's made this statement: the power behind the power. Okay? You have the power in a society. So I'm going off your catered thing, like almost as though it's intentional. There's a power behind the power. And the power behind the power isn't necessarily a group of people like the elders of Zion kind of thing, right? Like it's the Jewish conspiracists who are really running the country kind of stuff. That's just anti-Semitic trope nonsense, right? But there's a power behind the power of like, it's like it's an energy or it's something. It's just the way the system is organized in a way that just keeps power concentrated in a certain place, right? And there's also the gazillionaires who are, moving things around and stuff, but they're not nearly as organized as a lot of us might believe. And I've spent enough time with them, some of them, to know that that's not happening, right? You want to know why Trump? I'll tell you why Trump is here. It's actually quite makes sense. We're in a new era. The way we got out of the Great Depression, and it was probably one tiny 2 pages in your history books, but the Great Depression is when the first time the entire market just collapsed. And the way we got out of it is the government, the U.S. government just played a major role, just jumped in and just invested in the economy and invested in putting people back to work. We borrowed money and borrowed and borrowed and borrowed, and we just got the wheels running again. The wheels came to a stop, and we just forced them to run again. And we had a government that was very much a socialist-type government. And then World War II happened, and we weren't prepared for World War II. And once the Germans invaded Poland, and once we realized, oh my God, we're in, we had to suddenly have an army to go against Germany in a matter of like 9 months. Do you know what that took? Do you have any idea what that took? That took complete government intervention. Pure, as close to socialism as you're ever going to imagine, okay? So this moves along, and then for the next decades, we're sort of battling back and forth between how much government involvement there will be and how much there won't be. And then you go to this, what's called neoliberalism. And neoliberalism is basically free market, deregulation, just let business do whatever it wants to do, travel anywhere in the world. Well, this is what happens. Business started realizing, wait, why am I going to pay to have these desks made here in the United States when I got to pay laborers, back in 1980, I got to pay them $20 an hour. I can just go to Mexico and I can pay somebody 20 hours a week. And so suddenly jobs were going and everything is changing and banks are deregulating. We deregulate the banks so they're not paying their taxes and everything changes. And the stock market just blows up, man. It just blows up. And we just get fabulously rich. But we see a very distinct difference between the haves and the have-nots. And the middle class doesn't keep up with the haves. And so suddenly we got these billionaire class growing. And the billionaires are the ones that are investing in all the businesses that are making these kinds of things overseas and products going back and forth. No regulation. Yeah, no regulation is awesome. And it helped to bring other nations out of poverty. So we saw global poverty decrease tremendously, but we also saw that the majority of people in the United States did not keep up, could not keep up in the way they really needed to keep up. They would be predicted to keep up because the profits were going into the hands of smaller numbers of people, all right? So now you got 1985. Look at China. This is China's GDP. Okay? 1985, it's like $200. That's like the average Chinese citizen was making like $200 a year. Okay? What we didn't predict was that some countries around the world were going to use this deregulation and neoliberalism to their advantage. And China was one of them. And China, look what China did, man. And see where that arrow is? That's where the U.S. is. That's our GDP. But look at China right below that in 2023. Man, dude, Chinese, see the Chinese? It's a different world order, man. The global economy is not what it was in 1985. It's completely different. And there are a lot of Americans who are realizing this, and they're feeling this, and they're seeing it. And no one has stopped it. No one's been able to stop it, and no one's been able to really stay like, oh, this is a problem. For me, I'm a globalist in the sense that I'm an American citizen, but, I'm okay. Neoliberalism, it's been really good for people around the world and so on, but I'm 60, how old am I? 64? It's like, I see it a little differently. But man, Trump is saying, hey, this open borders, this deregulation stuff, no tariffs. What do you mean no tariffs? You gotta have tariffs. You gotta control this thing, man. And Trump is saying, you gotta control it. If you don't control this global exchange, this global marketplace, the U.S., China's gonna continue to rise, and they're gonna pass the U.S. And it's not just China. The actual big country in the 21st century is India. It's like, it's not there now, we're not even close, but the world system is changing, and Trump is saying, yeah, we're going to stop all this. Yeah, we're going to stop it. And Obama didn't stop it. George W. Bush didn't stop it. The whole war in Iraq was all about neoliberalism. Obama didn't stop it at all. Obama kept it going. You see, Biden is like, they can't stop it. They can't even imagine it. But Trump, he's touching that nerve, man. And it's like, yeah, I get it. I get that. And so we're now at a place, if you go back to that first slide, what's next? The question marks, right? I don't know what's next. Nationalism, right? There's something else. And that's what we're battling out right now. So you may not, there are 1,000 reasons you could not like Trump, but he's looking at the future here of this country. I don't think he's doing it correctly. I think he's missing a lot of stuff because he's from this billionaire class, and I think he's just not very smart about a lot of things he needs to be smarter about. But he's willing to take some things on that other people aren't willing to see, and they're too invested in it. The whole neoliberal vision and thinking is just part of everybody. So that's the way to understand Trump, man. And it's like, yeah, I got it. Of the two candidates, can I say this? If I'm going to bet on which of these two candidates can really address this neoliberal world that we're in and like pull it back by the reins, I'm going to be like, yeah, Trump's going to do it. He's going to be able to do stuff. Partly because he just does stuff. He doesn't even think. He just does stuff, which is the good and the bad. His people. So I spent a lot of time, reading from people and listening to people who work with him. And he's so ADD. Okay, am I allowed to say that? He's like ADD. He's like his mind. They can't keep. He's like a little kid who's been eating too much Halloween candy. He can't think straight, and all they do, what they learn is like, he's like, I want to see this happen. And they're like, okay, Mr. President, We'll make sure that happens. And then they just don't do it because they know that he'll forget about it the next day. They used to argue with him, and then he would dig in. But now the people closest to him realize, we just ignore him. We'll tell him, yeah, okay, we'll take care of that. And he moves on to something else because that's how he is. There's the good and the bad of that, by the way. I mean, from a certain angle, it's horrible. Like, that's the best we can do, but nobody else stood up to neoliberalism in the way that he did. Yeah. Well, Bernie Sanders, but, Bernie Sanders is a communist, so we had to knock him out. Even though Joe Rogan, by the way, who just endorsed Trump, endorsed Bernie Sanders, 4 years ago. So, see what I mean? This is like insanity. Niels from the Netherlands says, do Americans have enough empathy for the other side to keep the country together? I'm concerned that we don't. I'm concerned that the visions, most of you do. You're not going to be fighting in the streets. But you got enough of these militia groups, the left and the right, that, I don't know, it could break down really fast. Yeah, it could break down really, really fast. And I think that you all, maybe some people, don't understand how quickly it could break down. So no, I'm not certain we'll keep it together. I'm hoping we do. But I'm praying that the victory or the loss, whatever it is, that happens is decisive enough that, yeah, man, I don't know.
I just wanted to kind of ask you, people have been claiming that there's been a rise in political extremism, especially especially towards the right, amongst young men, not only in America but globally.
Yeah.
So how do you think? Do you think that there has been a rise
Definitely.
in this ideology I'm kind of wondering, why do you think these young men seek these groups, and what do you believe they're searching for when they start delving into these dangerous ideologies?
Well, first off, people remember the class we just did last week, losing our country, right? People have the sense that they really are losing the country. The countries are changing. We don't notice it so much because we're a multicultural nation, but man, when you're Austria or Italy or the Netherlands or Sweden or Finland or in France, right? Although mostly it's in bigger cities, right? But you really see that, whoa, we're no longer what we were. And so you're losing the culture, losing the country. And so we can say, oh, that's a really good thing because that's multiculturalism. But it's not necessarily, why is that a good thing? I mean, Korea is going to hit this. Korea is 97% Koreans. You go to Korea, 90% of the people have genetic ancestry from their great-great-great-grandparents who lived in the peninsula of Korea. So, you haven't lost anything, but you really lose. And so people feel that. And then if you tend to be a person who is going to be harmed the most by neoliberal policies of the Democrats and the Republicans, it's these people are out, they're not, my job, just the jobs that we had in this town, they all just went to Mexico, or they went to Guatemala, or they went to Brazil. It's F y'all, man. Who am I going to fight? I got to fight somebody. So I'm going to come up with some story about who I can fight. You can't just fight the neoliberals. That's nobody. And then you got somebody, you got the Democrats saying hey, go fight. It's the Republicans. Donald Trump, he's your enemy. Go fight him. It's wait, hang on a second. No. If you listen to what Trump's saying, he's actually on your side over here. But they're telling you to fight him. And then the Trump side is saying no, those Democrats, go fight them. And it's no, this is the problem. And then you got all these people that came back from war. All these men. It's not just men, by the way. But all these men, they all came back from war starting in, 2001. And then they've been trained and they're amped up and people are going and they're ready and they got all the, we recruited more and more people. And then you're back and you're trained and you're ready and someone says, hey, we need a militia. You're like, hey, I'm in. I got the training. So you look at all these militia groups, of which there are many. Pennsylvania has more militia groups than any state in the country, last I heard. But again, that's one of those things that I don't keep up on my research, so it may or may not be true. And then you got all these, I would volunteer. I got all the guns. I want to support my country. I wave a flag. I put myself in the line for my country. So I'll join the militia group. And then you lose track of what you're actually fighting for because you're not paying attention because you're so busy with other things that you're not listening to Sam Richards, for example, or someone who's trying to be reasonable saying wait a minute, hang on a second. Maybe your problem isn't as simple as the way you're making it out to be. Maybe it's actually more complex. And then you get lost and you go, and before you know it, you're down a rabbit hole. It's oh God, how did that happen?
So what are your thoughts on the idea that most of today's issues can only be solved on the socially and cultural level as opposed to the political level? And the idea that Trump is probably one of the largest cultural icons of today.
Yeah. Dude, he is the largest cultural icon today, man. So this is what I mean about you gotta, if you're any kind of sociologist, you gotta step back and watch this phenomenon and say, whoa, man. Okay? I wish he understood that. Because if he really understood how much power he had and if he accepted that, if he really stepped into it, he would stop saying some of the really dumb things he said. And the media would stop covering a lot of it. But, part of it, it's not, stop calling it fake news, by the way. It's the guy says the most outlandish shit. And you cover it. You just keep typing oh my God, he just said this. And you go to you listen to any of his rallies and it's just one thing after another. And you're just I'm constantly amazed. Oh my God, he just said this. So it's not that, but maybe they would stop covering it. And he would, and if the supporters of Trump, my wish is for the supporters of Trump would put your energy not behind him, but behind the movement, and stop seeing the other side. And same goes for the other side. Stop just making stuff up and believing simplistic things about the so-called Democrat. I don't even know who Democrats Harris stuff. And the Democrats Harris people, stop trying to pigeonhole Trump supporters as somehow really bad or evil people, man. They're part of this intense movement that is going to transform the world, and not necessarily for the worst. That's the thing you got to really understand. It's not necessarily for the worse. And if you don't understand what I mean by that, then study what neoliberalism has done in the past 40 years. Study the negative consequences of neoliberalism, and you will see that if we start moving away from that maybe 30 years from now, we're going to say, that was a painful moment, but damn good thing we got through it. Yeah. That would be my wish for people.